Hello, everyone. Really appreciate you following, and hopefully, you've enjoyed my material. The emphasis on finding a balance from what you normally get, because you won't get a report like this on definitely not GB News, um, BBC, RTV. Um, you just won't. Possibly a little bit on Channel 4, but it'll only be a little bit as well. And you have to look into things. That's why you have to look at different sources. And this relates to prevent. I mean, I'm not Palestinian, but I heard the little guy being clobbered, and our elite push it under the carpet. They're not interested. And yet they're screaming abdabs if, unfortunately, a Jew gets attacked here, because there's nothing. It's nothing about being Jewish or not, as far as I'm concerned. There are many, many, many Jews who disagree with Netanyahu, and unfortunately, their voice is not mentioned, is omitted. And unfortunately, in today's world, that seems to be the biggest weapon. Put it under the carpet. Anyway, this is fascinating. It's up front, Al Jazeera, and it's Mark Lamont Hill, sits down with journalist and author Adam Johnson to discuss Gaza, Israeli Hasbara, and his new book, How to Sell a Genocide. And just see what you think about this. It is definitely an eye-opener.
And security needs. And I just think everything's become so desensitized and it's so normalized.
You mentioned that your book focuses on the first year. It also focuses on kind of center-left politics. You don't run the full gamut. Well, why'd you choose to focus there?
That is the excellent question. Certainly the first question I usually get. There's two reasons. Number one, there's a baseline anti-Arab, pro-war kind of conservative thread current in this country. There was one PPP poll from 2015 that found that 30% of Republicans support bombing Aragba, the fictional country from Aladdin. So you're already dealing with a kind of baseline reptile brain racism. And Republicans broadly support Israel, broadly support bombing Palestinians. Just poll after poll shows this. So you didn't really need to convince them. To get it from that 40% to 65%, which is to say to actually make it bipartisan, you needed liberal buy-in. Especially was, and this is the second reason, because there was a Democratic precedent in the office for the first 15 months of the genocide. And so everybody knows that, for example, you needed the New York Times to launder WMD propaganda to get to Iraq. You needed the New York Times editorial board to support the war in Iraq. You needed the Washington Post editorial board to launder, weapons of mass destruction claims that made it the UN. You need liberal media to make things bipartisan, and you can't do very unpopular grand wars or genocides without both parties buying in. But liberal media is more high leverage.
There's always been a kind of bipartisan investment in Zionism, right? In terms of media, like there's never been a moment where liberal media has been.
Yes, but this level of carnage was unprecedented. I mean, again, to get 300-400 people killed a day, 500 people killed a day for months on end is completely unheard of. And the level of violence, especially with social media, with Twitter, with TikTok, people seeing this violence every day, you needed these liberal establishment institutions, the New York Times and CNN, to really go into overdrive and to first off 9/11ify October 7th, to reduce Hamas to a sort of cartoon terrorist villain that had no political or secular grievances, to promote beheaded baby propaganda, etc., etc. You needed that to kind of go in overdrive, and it needed to come from liberal coded or democratic aligned media for it to have bipartisan buy-in. Because obviously, if Fox News tells people that, it doesn't really move the dial. But if the Atlantic and the New York Times and the Washington Post do, it takes it from that 40% to 65%. And they needed that kind of, they need to provide space for Biden to support Israel as a Democrat. Yeah. And so the liberal media, and I use the small L liberal, not in the kind of Rush Limbaugh boogeyman sense, but the small L liberal media in this instance was the dispositive factor. It was the thing that made it possible, without which there would have been, I think, it would have been politically impossible to create space for Biden to support this for as long as he did.
I want to think about the hard right folk.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Candace Owens.
Right.
All of the kind of very popular and populist right-wing media talking heads. They've been offering some significant criticisms of Israel.
Right.
For what reason, I don't know.
Well, I have a theory.
That's what I want to know. I want you to help me make sense of this.
I'll say this about Tucker Carlson. If I'm Palestinian, I take any help anywhere I can get it. I'm not gonna get too precious about that. I think that we're not in a position to necessarily need Israel critics to follow the most perfect left-wing line. I would like that they would. I would prefer if Tucker Carlson oriented his criticism of Israel in coherent anti-imperialism versus exceptionalizing Israel as somehow corrupting the U.S. But you take wins where you can get them, and certainly eroding support among Israel, among MAGA, can have utility. I will say that Tucker Carlson's MO is that he's trying to salvage the nominal America First brand for J.D. Vance to run in 2028 and prop him up as the face of anti-Israel or Israel skeptical right-wing politics, because I think that's a constituency that they feel they need to have.
But that constituency is also often anti-Semitic.
Yeah, of course.
They often traffic in anti-Semitic narratives, tropes,
Yeah.
etc. I know you say we got to take wins where we get them, but if right-wing media is offering a critique of Israel, but it's at least partially an unprincipled one because it's bathed in anti-Semitism, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we have to be clear-eyed about what's motivating it. And you see this in the way that, for example, Joe Kent, who retired from the State Department, criticized, he kept talking about Trump wanting to do the right thing with respect to Israel or Palestine or Iran, but his Zionist donors or Zionist administration officials kept tricking him. And at a certain point, this is his third run for office. He's been running for president or been president for over 10 years. You have to sort of acknowledge that he himself is a Zionist. That this is not some manipulative plot. He is just a thing he agrees with. It's the same thing. You saw this with liberals and Joe Biden. This kind of became an MSNBC narrative too, that Netanyahu was manipulating Biden. It's no, he just agrees because he's also a Zionist. Exactly. But you can be a Zionist and not be Jewish, and this sort of is seen as confusing to some people.
That's part of why I get a little uneasy reading your book, because it almost, and I love the book, but there's a way that I think someone could walk away thinking that liberals just tipped it over the edge, that it was up to liberals could have saved the day.
Well, they could have, because Biden could have stopped doing it.
But as could have conservatives. But I guess my point is, it almost understates how significantly bipartisan pro-Israel, pro-Zionist narratives have been in the media since beginning.
Well, yeah, and I referenced those antecedents, and they're certainly there. I will say in the case of Joe Biden, though, that there had been precedents, right? Joe Biden forced Netanyahu in 2021 to stop bombing. Now, obviously, it wasn't preceded by an October 7th event, so it was a different political climate. And obviously, Obama had done it, Bush II had done it, and with Lebanon in 2006. Obviously, Reagan famously did it in Lebanon in the 80s.
Right.
So, there's precedents where Biden could have stopped him. He simply agreed with what Netanyahu was doing.
You talk about the role of U.S. universities and nonprofits, which you call the instruments of ideological disciplining. You say that they hide behind this, again, idea of objectivity and neutrality. But you seem to be saying they do something else.
Well, so what's important to understand is that when the October 7th attacks happened in October of 2023, this was really peak, for want of a better term, I don't like this term, but we'll call it woke 1.0, where having political opinions was considered okay, as long as they were sort of sufficiently generic, right? You could sort of oppose racism, but you can't support reparations, or, right? It sort of existed within the liberal milieu. So after October 7th, obviously major universities, nonprofits, news organizations publish statements of solidarity with Israel. After Russia invades Ukraine in February of 2022, they published statements of solidarity with Ukraine. That was completely normal and accepted. But then as the body count in Gaza begins to do a hockey stick graph curve, right? Thousands and thousands in the first few months. And then there's increasing pressure for these organizations to call for a ceasefire. Suddenly, their tongues and hands are tied. We don't have opinions. And we took the U.S. News and World Report top 25 universities, so it wasn't arbitrary, we weren't cherry picking anything. And 12 of those universities adopted neutrality policies immediately after October 7th in late 2023 and early 2024. So these liberal nonprofits, universities, needed to use the language of neutrality and objectivity, despite the fact that literally a year and a half prior they had done the opposite. They had shown support for Ukraine. And you see this liberal hypocrisy pretty much throughout the first 6 months of the genocide.
At one point, you compare a media coverage of former Harvard University president Claudine Gay and the bipartisan panic over alleged anti-Semitism on college campuses with Israel's killing of 5-year-old Hind Rajab, which happened around the same time. You note that, quote, during the height of the Claudine Gay scandal, December 5th, 2023 to January 5th, 2024, Israel killed more than 3,000 children in Gaza. Yet the controversy around Claudine Gay got disproportionate media attention. Tell me why that would happen. What does that reveal to you?
Yeah, the killing of, the comparison's a little arbitrary, but they're around the same time, and I was asserting that the Hind Rajab story was intrinsically important. This was a major international news story, caused a major outcry. Again, could have been one of those rallying cries where people used it as and this was in January of 2024, to end the genocide, but instead it's completely ignored. It's not mentioned on MSNBC a month after she's killed once. It's not mentioned once. It's mentioned on CNN in only 2 segments, throwaway segments in the middle of the day. That doesn't have front page coverage in the New York Times. It has only a handful of mentions. Whereas the Claudine Gay story has literally dozens of front page news stories, both digitally and in print.
Is that about antipathy toward Palestinians, or is that just, again, a sexy news story? Black university president, anti-Semitism,
I can guarantee
plagiarism, all the stuff. I mean, this isn't right-wing red meat.
But I can guarantee you that there was not, the news readers were not huddled around the water cooler on Monday morning asking about mid-level administrators at Harvard and other universities. This was a manufactured story from the get-go. There's certainly no evidence of any organic demand for the level of coverage, the incessant coverage, the dozens and scores of articles for this coverage. This is not something that the Zoomers are crying out for. This is a pure media concoction manufactured to create a scandal. Now, can Republicans in Congress fuel that themselves by calling these BS show trials that they did in December of 2023? Of course, but anyone who thinks that there's any objective news value to that, or at least that this was about ratings, it had nothing to do with ratings or clicks. It had everything to do with a meta-narrative of campus anti-Semitism for which they had no actual evidence.
You end your book on a less optimistic note than some readers might expect. You describe the normalization of the genocide as, quote, historic achievement by the U.S. security state and its media allies. You also say that it won't lead to any accountability. I was hoping for a warm and fuzzy, hopeful ending that allowed me to believe that this entire media apparatus could be reshaped, that this entire discourse could be changed. You don't seem to think so. Tell me why.
Well, there's one qualifier there that is holding up the weight of the world, which is, I say, unless something radically changes in our politics. And I know that's a bit of a hell of a caveat. But I don't think structurally there's any incentive for accountability with respect to the media. That doesn't mean I'm not working on it. What I meant by the ending is this is the way it's going, this is the trajectory. But it is supposed to be a call to action to do something about it. It's not meant to be disempowering, but I do think we have to be sober about reality, which is that there is a very sophisticated public relations system in place, both within the media, the Israel lobby and adjacent organizations, and who knows how many PR firms that are operating in the shadows, to obfuscate and to distract from this outrage among liberals. 77% of Democrats think Israel committed genocide. Only 11% don't think that.
That's a pretty stunning number, by the way.
It's a huge
relative
number.
to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, what they may have thought.
Right, but only 8% of Democrats in Congress think that. And you saw this again. I don't want to over-index it, but the primaries in New York, I think, largely reflect this. That there's a popular upswell of anger that can be channeled, but we have to figure out ways of doing it in a way that's constructive and not counterinsurgency. And there's so much public relations money that goes into deflecting and creating pseudo off-ramps for liberals who support Israel. And I'll give you one example. So you have this line, I support cutting off aid to Israel, that is being shopped by J Street and other pro-Israel groups. This comes from Netanyahu's office because they know that that politically it's a liability for the U.S. to fund Israel, but they're going to still sell weapons and do the weapons partnership, but Israel's going to pay for it. But that's an accounting gimmick. That doesn't really matter. But it gives them a good line to go back to their constituents and say, I support cutting off aid to Israel. Sort of sounds good. So there's all these public relations pseudo solutions and pseudo accountability that we're going to see, I think, in the next 6 months, next 6 months to 2 years. that we have to be vigilant about. That is this genuine accountability? Is this genuine reform? Or is this just counterinsurgency and in a way of deflecting responsibility? So that's
right. Incredibly disturbing, because the last couple of years, American Palestinian civilians, whether they're disabled, Christians, have been journalists, doctors, have been targeted and killed without any accountability. That's how far the goalposts have changed, and that's how difficult it is. And people have to shout out. Democracy has to be fought for, as Oliver Stone said. And it's difficult. It's a difficult battle when the whole tide is going against. But those Israelis who oppose such measures definitely exist. More next week, and they see the damage being done to Jews generally, even the American reputation, and they see the blowback is going to be enormous, incalculable, and that's what it is. It's not a pretty situation at all. Well, that's what we're faced with, and that's what we have to stand up against. Right, bye for now and see you next week.